In 1281, the largest naval invasion in history reached the shores of Japan. 4,400 ships. 100,000 soldiers. The biggest empire on earth, come to swallow an island. By the next morning, almost all of them were dead. And Japan invented a word that the world would not forget for 700 years. Kamikaze. To understand what was about to happen, you have to understand the man who ordered it. His name was Kublai Khan, and he ruled the largest contiguous land empire the world has ever seen. His grandfather Genghis had broken open Eurasia. His brother Hulagu had crushed Baghdad 23 years earlier, ending the Abbasid Caliphate in a single afternoon of fire. Kublai had finished the conquest of China. He had moved his capital to a city we now call Beijing. He had taken a new dynastic name, Yuan. His empire ran from the Mediterranean to the Pacific. Every great power in Eurasia had either submitted, paid tribute, or burned. Every power. Except one. One archipelago, on the far edge of the Eastern Sea, had refused his envoys. The Kamakura shogunate of Japan had received the Mongol diplomats, read their demands for submission, and beheaded them. An insult of that scale, in Kublai's world, had only one answer. 7 years before the storm, in November of 1274, Kublai sent his first fleet. It was not the Great Armada. It was the warning shot. 900 ships. 33,000 men. Mongol cavalry, Han Chinese infantry, Korean sailors. They burned the smaller islands of Tsushima and Iki on the way. They landed at Hakata Bay. They met the samurai. And the samurai of 1274 were not ready. Japanese warfare in the late 13th century was a contest of individual honor. A samurai would ride forward, shout his lineage, and challenge an enemy of equal rank. The Mongols did not fight that way. They fought in massed units. They used signal drums to maneuver entire wings of troops. They had a weapon the samurai had never seen before. A ceramic shell, filled with gunpowder and iron shrapnel, lit by a short fuse and lobbed by hand. The Japanese called it tetsuhao. It was the world's first hand grenade, and it changed everything in a single afternoon. The samurai held the beach. Barely. And on the second night, a storm came in off the sea. It was not yet the great kamikaze. It was a smaller storm. But it sank perhaps a third of the invasion fleet and forced the survivors to retreat home. To the Japanese, it was a gift. To the Mongols, it was a setback. Both sides knew it would not be the last visit. For 7 years, the Japanese built a wall. 20 kilometers of dressed stone, 2.5 meters high, curving along the entire length of Hakata Bay. The Japanese called it the Genko Borui, the Mongol invasion fortification. And for 7 years, on the other side of the strait, Kublai Khan built ships. He ordered them by the thousand. From Goryeo, Korea, where his vassals supplied conscript shipwrights. From the recently conquered Song shipyards of South China. Modern underwater archaeology has found those ships. Divers off Takashima Island have spent the last 30 years recovering anchors, helmets, and the broken hulls themselves. And here, the story changes. Because the ships Kublai built for the greatest naval invasion in history were not proper ocean-going vessels. They were flat-bottomed river craft. Mass-produced under impossible deadlines by conscripted Korean labor. Hastily adapted, lashed together, sent to sea in a fleet so vast that nobody had time to ask whether the timber would hold. In the summer of 1281, the fleet came. It came in 2 prongs. The Eastern Route Army, 900 ships, 40,000 men, sailed from Korea in June and reached the bay first. The Southern Route Army, 3,500 ships, 100,000 men, sailed from China and joined them in August. Together, over 4,000 ships. Around 140,000 men. Mongols, Han Chinese, Koreans, Jurchen, Central Asian auxiliaries. The full multi-ethnic war machine of the Yuan dynasty. They were the most powerful invasion force the world had ever seen. And they were sitting at anchor in a bay, in the middle of typhoon season. This time, the samurai were ready. They had the wall. They had 7 years to study Mongol tactics. They had stopped fighting like a tournament. Now they fought in units. They massed archers on the wall. They held the high ground above the beaches. And when the Yuan troops tried to land, they were thrown back. With the beachhead refused, the Mongol commanders did something strange. They chained their ships together. They lashed them gunwale to gunwale, in long floating platforms, anchored in the bay. The idea was to create a stable fighting base, a wooden island they could defend, sortie from, regroup on. It was a clever idea on a flat sea. It would become a death sentence in a storm. The samurai answered with something the Mongols had not expected. Small boats. 2, 3, 4 men at a time. Crossing the bay at night, sliding between the chained Yuan hulls, climbing aboard with daggers and short swords. They set fires. They cut throats. They threw the Mongols' own Tetsuhao grenades back into Yuan holds. For 2 months, this went on. 2 months. The largest fleet in history, pinned in a bay, bleeding men in the dark. And out at sea, the air began to change. On August 15, 1281, the sky over Kyushu turned the color of a bruise. The Korean sailors knew that color. They had grown up watching the August skies. They told the Mongol commanders what was coming. The commanders did not believe them. Or, by other accounts, they believed them, but had no choice. The fleet had nowhere to retreat to. The bay was its anchor. The chained ships were its army. They waited. It hit at night. 100-mile-an-hour winds. 30-foot waves. And the chains held. The chains, which had made the fleet a fortress in calm water, now made it a machine of mutual destruction. Ship slammed into ship. Lashed hulls tore each other apart. Men who jumped clear of one wreck were crushed against the next. A better-built fleet might have survived. A fleet of proper ocean jumps, built for the South China Sea, riding out the storm at sea anchor in deep water, they would have lost ships, but most would have come home. This fleet was not those ships. This was a fleet of flat-bottomed river craft, chained together in a shallow bay, in the path of a typhoon. The storm was the killing blow. But the brittleness of the hulls was what made the kill complete. At dawn on August 16th, the wind dropped. The samurai walked down to the beach. The bay was full of wreckage. Broken hulls turned belly up. Pieces of mast. Drowned men in Yuan armor washing in with the tide. Some survivors had reached Takashima Island, half a kilometer offshore. The samurai crossed and finished them. Modern estimates, at least half the invasion force drowned. Perhaps 70% or more. Korean and Han Chinese survivors were enslaved. Mongol officers were executed. The largest seaborne invasion the world had ever seen had ceased to exist in a single night. When the news reached Beijing, Kublai Khan did not weep. He did not abandon the dream. He planned a third invasion. He ordered new ships, new conscripts, new grain. It was scheduled for 1283. It never sailed. A rebellion in southern China demanded the troops. Then his son and chosen heir Xinjin died. Kublai's health failed. He drank more. He grew heavier. He died in 1294, still officially planning to invade Japan, still officially the Great Khan, still officially the master of the world. The Yuan dynasty would not last another century. No Mongol fleet ever sailed for Japan again. And the samurai who had won? They had paid for their own defense. They had built the wall, manned the wall, fought the battles, raided the ships. Now they wanted to be paid. But there was no Mongol land to give them. No Mongol cities to loot. There was only a beach full of wreckage and a country with no spoils. The Kamakura shogunate went bankrupt trying to compensate them. The financial wound never closed. 50 years later, in 1333, the shogunate fell, partly because it had won too well, and could not afford the victory. In Japan, the storm of 1281 became a sacred fact. The gods had sent a wind. The wind had saved the homeland. They wrote it down in the kanji. Kamikaze. Divine wind. For 700 years, that word slept in temple records and history books. Then, in the autumn of 1944, the Imperial Japanese Navy faced an American fleet larger than anything Kublai Khan had ever imagined. They did not have a typhoon coming. So they made themselves the wind. The suicide pilots of 1944 took their name directly from this. Kamikaze. The divine wind. Their commanders consciously invoked 1281. The storm that had saved Japan once. The wind that, this time, would have to be men. We should be careful here. Most of what we know about the samurai side of these battles comes from a single illustrated scroll, the Mōko Shūrai Ekotoba. It was commissioned by one samurai, Takezaki Suenaga. He paid for it. He is the hero of nearly every panel. It is a beautiful, vivid, and self-promotional document, drawn up in part so its commissioner could claim more compensation from the bankrupt shogunate. The Japanese sources tell us about samurai courage. The Yuan sources tell us about Mongol numbers. The seabed at Takashima tells us about the ships. All three stories are true. None of them is the whole truth. Today, divers descend off the cliffs of Takashima Island into clear blue-green water. They bring up Mongol anchors. Ceramic shards from Chinese stoneware jars. Helmets with the lacquer still on them. Pieces of flat-bottomed hulls that should never have been at sea. They have spent 30 years rewriting the story. Not denying the typhoon. The typhoon was real. But adding a quieter fact alongside the divine wind, the largest fleet in history had been built too fast, by too few hands, out of too poor a timber. Heaven had help. If this changed how you see the storm, subscribe. We reconstruct a lost world every week.